Hello. So we're going to keep going and talk about what sometimes is called the Second Revolution. Things start to change and become a little bit more radical. A lot of this has to do with how other countries are perceiving the actions in France. So one of the things that you should definitely be familiar with is that England and France quickly become, if they weren't already, because remember the French and Indian War and remember the French assistance during the American Revolution, we already know there's a lot of kind of bad sentiment, bad feelings right there, that England is going to be one of the major opponents to France during this period as well as some previous periods. And one of the most prominent English people that speaks out against the French Revolution at this point is Edmund Burke. So he's a sort of a classic conservative, and he is also very educated. And so he's able to craft kind of one of the most intellectual defenses, or one of the most famous, that is, of European conservatism. So basically, he's writing out against the French Revolution. And one of the things that he is not in favor of is how the bourgeoisie is kind of trying to take away some of the privileges, or take some of the privileges that were previously really only reserved to the upper classes, and take them for themselves, right? So he defended kind of privileges that were inherited, um, especially those of the English monarchy and aristocracy. They were really nervous that the bourgeoisie were kind of taking those rights for themselves, and he believed that they should just be reserved to those groups that had had them for so many years. He also, and this is really important because he is right, he predicts that if the French Revolution is going to continue to go in the direction that it's going, that it's going to become violent and it's going to become anarchistic. And he also says that it's going to be dictatorial. All right, you might think, well, isn't a dictator one person? A dictatorship could also be something that is um, formed by a group that does not allow any opposition. All right, so think about, the Nazi Party in Germany during World War II. I mean, yes, of course, Hitler was the major dictator, but also anyone who was also a Nazi kind of could fall into that category of a dictatorship, right? So he believes that kind of the revolutionary forces, the radicals, are going to become dictatorial, and he's going to be right on about that as we continue. Um, so another thing is that he certainly there were people in England that are kind of looking at this revolution and looking at the Enlightenment and saying, maybe we should have more privileges for ourselves, especially the middle classes. All right, so this doesn't mean that the entire country of England is against the revolution, just more the aristocracy, kind of the more educated people. So what Edmund Burke does then is he issues them a warning, right? He says, look, if you want to adopt your own liberties, fine, but go slowly, go deliberatively. Don't all of a sudden form this branch of government that is only represented, at least primarily, by one part of the population. In other words, this National Assembly that suddenly has assumed power, they are not representing the entire population. A lot of clergy people and noblemen are left out. And some of them are starting to become anti-monarch. All right, so he's kind of saying, look, go slow when you're adapting your own liberties. Um, and eventually, we're going to see that Burke is one of the figures that encourages other European countries to go to war with France to suppress the French Revolution. All right, so basically, you're going to see as we do end up going to war, that Edmund Burke is a major force in encouraging that. The other figure to be familiar with, and you might know him from U.S. history, is Thomas Paine, right? You might know him as the author of Common Sense. But this time we're going to talk about another work he wrote a little bit later called The Rights of Man, all right? And so this shows us again that some people, some British people, well, in this case, Thomas Paine is kind of a British expat. He ends up in the United States. Um, but he responds to Burke's argument and he defends the Enlightenment principles, and he thinks that the French Revolution is okay. All right, he believes that the French Revolution is an example of the triumph of liberty under despotism. All right, so in other words, you might ask the question, all right, does this mean that Thomas Paine advocates violence if it is worth it? Because does violence sometimes accomplish liberty over despotism? Maybe. We saw that happen in the Americas, or in the United States specifically. So, you see kind of an opposite opinion here. Also, you're going to see that because some people come out supporting the revolution, like Thomas Paine, like Olympe de Gouges, like Mary Wollstonecraft, some kings and nobles in Europe, at first they were okay with the revolution when it was very moderate, but once it starts to turn a little bit more radical, more and more monarchs and people with money are going to start feeling threatened.